So we have an opportunity for questions to both Gina and Lori, and I think Christina may be monitoring online. Are you? Or okay, thank you. Thank you. Ben.
Oh, and then his mic as well. Oh, all right, there we go. Ben Greenhagen, APL, also league chair. So I want a clarification, then I also have a question. What you said kind of implied that the Viper termination is contained within LDAP, and it's more or less Joel's decision. Did PSD have input into that, or how? What was the relationship with PSD into that decision?
Yeah, thanks for that question. PSD definitely had a voice in that. So although Joel manages the line, we work in partnership very closely. So there were discussions not only between my team and myself and Joel, but also throughout SMD. They were a part of all of the discussions there.
Okay, so then that actually makes my question more valid. So I posed this question earlier today, and I think that you're probably very well suited to answer it. And that's, we've been hearing over and over, it's a very constrained fiscal situation. It's very important that we complete and fly our confirmed missions. And the cost of that is that we're delaying future opportunities, including New Frontiers, Discovery, Simplex. Everything's pushing off to the right to make sure that we get the things that have already been confirmed out the door and they get their opportunity. What you said there about terminating Viper so that we can have future opportunities for CLIP sounds like the opposite. And I was wondering if you could comment on why Viper's being treated differently than what we've been hearing publicly.
Sure. So I would say Viper is being treated the way that we treat all of our missions, and that's the fact that they are still subject to reviews based on schedule and cost. And so the fact that they breached over their development cost by 30% automatically triggers a review. And so we are really working hard to get all of those confirmed missions out the door and operating to the best of our ability. And that's truly, genuinely what we want. But at the same time, we need to have realistic expectations moving forward of what is achievable and going through these reviews. And they're put in place for a reason. So any other mission that breaches the same way would have similar review processes.
And some of those other missions have also gotten independent review boards as well to evaluate them. Is Viper going to get one of those?
That is a good question. I don't have the answer to that, but I'm looking around the room, and let me get to Joel on that one.
Okay, Clive.
I am not, oh, bloody hell. I am not as soft-spoken as Ben Greenhagen. So I'm not going to ask a question about Viper. So everybody's surprised. I'm going to ask a question of Laurie in your new role. Great presentation, very excited about human exploration of the moon, very concerned about Starship as the human landing system. No launch or landing pad is being provided for Artemis 3 or 4. And we saw what the first test of Starship did to the launch landing pad, purpose-built, that knocked out engines and they had to destroy the spacecraft. And now we've got artist renditions of Starship standing very vertically on a non-flat polar terrain on loose regolith with the ascent engines being at the base of the spacecraft. Has SpaceX given ESDMD any assurances that they are going to be able to launch back from the moon safely? Because it's really bothering me in terms of loss of crew because of that very fact, and the fact that there seems to be very little investment in launch and landing pads on the moon. So I figured I'd give you an easy one to start with. So.
Hey, Clive, I know I can always count on you. No, I really do appreciate your question. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done here, clearly. The one thing I will say, and these are things that I'm learning over in my new job now, is just the incredible degree of scrutiny and effort that goes into certifying any flight that's going to carry our human astronauts, and that we will be we need to be convinced that they will be kept safe the entirety of the flight, which means all the way to the moon, landing safely, and the return. So I know that there's an incredible amount of scrutiny on that. And as I said in the presentation, SpaceX will need to demonstrate that capability of the safe landing and return before we send our astronauts on Starship. So while I hear your concerns, I think those are all good questions that we should be asking and thinking about. And I'm not saying that we just trust them. I think they have to demonstrate that, and there's a whole process in place for that to happen.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Christina, are there any online questions? No? Oh, here we go. Yeah, Carl.
Hi, yeah, Carl Hibbs, APO. I have a kind of follow on to Clive, but also a question for Lori related to Viper. Going back to Apollo, remember the landing legs designs were frozen. They didn't know that much about the moon, and it turned out to be big pads, right? Because they didn't know that much, right? So given that science enables exploration, and that Viper maybe could have found some information about the polar terrains that would potentially affect the design for spacecraft or to land on the polar regions that are terra incognito, would ESDMD consider potentially mothballing Viper, and maybe the budget will improve in a year, and flying it later? Or is that just not an option?
I will tell you it is not under consideration. I think that the questions you ask are good questions, but I think that there are other ways to gain that information. I don't think that Viper is the only way to do that. And so that's at this point is not in the trade space.
Yeah, I'll ask a non-Viper question. So for Gina, you mentioned Lunar Trailblazer. We heard from Bethany a couple weeks ago at the European Lunar Symposium that they had run into some technical problems in TVAC that were being addressed, and they had a path forward. Do you know how that has turned out? Are they all set? They're going to be ready for launch?
Yep, so the updates that I've gotten in terms of some of the engines that have had to been replaced, everything's good to go, and they're on schedule for launch.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
That's good news. Any other questions? Yes.
Sorry, this is also regarding Viper. I'm sorry, more Viper, but I'm sure you expected that anyways. So Viper is not just a science mission, it's also an exploration mission, right? It's a prospecting mission. So it also supports, as we said, HUMD. However, all the budget seems to be falling upon the science directory. Can't the human exploration directory also pitch in some money to pull it out? It seems like the extra cost of doing this would be, a drop in a bucket for the scale and magnitude of HUMD.
I'll address that one, Gina. And I hear you, although keep in mind that every single budget across the agency is stretched well beyond what the plans were. So even within ESDMD, and just keep in mind that the ESDMD budget is on the same order of magnitude as the SMD budget. But again, you saw the incredible architecture and the plans that are in place for Artemis in order to assure that we can put in place that sustained presence and the sustained exploration. And again, it's just like, as Gina was describing, that, while we're doing amazing things with the funding that we have, it's still not quite enough to cover the work that's already in plan and already committed to. So while I hear your point, it is, again, I'm going to state that it's not in the trade space and that there are other ways to achieve some of those goals. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay. Second question. My understanding is part of the reason for the cancellation was that there's a combination of the fact that Viper went over budget, but also of the fact that Astrobotic failed miserably on its first launch, and therefore we had absolutely no partner, no demonstrated lander that could take us to the moon, and that would probably take another 3 years at least if Astrobotic does it right this time, just to demo that they can do it, and then more to actually land us there. So that is going to cost a lot of money, and putting all the people that are working on Viper on hold and continue to paying the salary costs more money on the side of Viper. So the question is, like, who came up with the idea of contracting a $500 million mission to land with a company that has absolutely no proven record and didn't even exist until recently to put it on the moon? I mean, this eventuality should have been foreseen in some way, right? How come that wasn't foreseen?
So what I can say is that Viper, originally, the budget was much lower than the $500 million where it is now. So that's one factor. But that's also part of the trade space of the work that the SEO office is doing in, trying to find these new ways to land on the moon and really exploring ways to get there and accepting some risk that comes along with it. Of course, sometimes hard decisions come with that. And as Joel has expressed, the decision to cancel was just figuring out going forward what those increased costs would be, what the risks are, what the budget is. That includes some of the delays that Viper incurred itself in terms of suppliers and getting parts, but also part of Astrobotic as well. So it's all one big equation that has come together for this.
Clive Neal, University of Notre Dame. I have a Viper comment now. Joel was saying that there's 2 weeks for indications of interest to help Viper, and if there aren't any, then the rover would be disassembled. I would implore you to keep the rover assembled and also to complete TVAC, which is due on the 21st of August. And I know Neo Surveyor is licking its chops trying to take that time because this mission is cancelled, although it isn't because Congress has to approve it. I would urge you to make sure that that goes through testing, it's passed its acoustic and its vibe test, and things are looking good, so that if there is a credible consortium at no cost to NASA, to take it to the moon, and there are a few that are lining up to do that, they have a manifest that is ready to go to the moon. That would be very enabling because you have a $500 million rover that's built, almost done testing, and then you terminate it and disassemble it. It just doesn't make much sense. So I would urge you to sort of follow the option of having consortia come in to take it to the moon, but make sure that it's ready to go. And I think then that's a good out and everybody wins and we get the data, hopefully. But anyway, thank you.
One last question, so David.
David Kring, LPI, and I think this is for Lori. There was a recent NASA comment that Artemis 3 may not be ready until at least 2028. I saw you use 2026 in your charts. Can you comment further on this potential delay for Artemis 3?
That was not a NASA comment. That came from another source. And so I'll just say that we are planning towards the 2026 launch for Artemis 3. That's the schedule.
Okay, great. Can we please thank Lori and Gina once again for coming today?